Welcome to the Wisdom That Breathes channel. Across all our platforms, we try to share wisdom which is relevant and accessible to everyone. But on this particular platform, we go deeper into some of the ancient principles found within the scriptures. If you find some of the terminology difficult or inaccessible, then go over to our Keshava Swami YouTube channel where you'll be able to find other content which is perhaps more relatable. Thank you and enjoy the wisdom that breathes.
Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Bhagavan Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Tam Sajivam Savajan Savadutam Hridana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Shakhanikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopikabanda Radha Nandana Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Vipassilubhyaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasudhi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Hare Ram Sankirtan ki Jai book CC Madhya, the last volume of Madhya. So Hare Krishna everyone, good morning, thank you so much for coming. So today we're continuing discussion on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And it's said that Vaishnavas have many qualities. Sometimes in different places it's mentioned in different ways. But often it's mentioned that Vaishnavas have 26 qualities. But it's mentioned that these qualities are split into two. 25 qualities are known as Tatastha Lakshan, or marginal qualities. And one quality is known as the Swarup Lakshan, or the essential quality. And it's mentioned that if a Vaishnava develops the Swarup Lakshan, then all the Tatastha Lakshan will automatically come about. So therefore, the question is, what's the Swarup Lakshan? What's the essential quality? Anyone have any ideas? Oh, sorry, the one before this. Sorry, Ramai, the one before this. Yeah, thank you. Anyone know what the Swarup Lakshan is that then triggers all other good qualities in the Vaishnava? Yes? Surrender to Krishna, yes. If you're surrendered to Krishna, then all other good qualities, truthfulness, compassion, kindness, non-enviousness, everything automatically comes about. And therefore, surrender is really the essential thing that we're looking for in our life. Surrender, how do you feel when you hear that word? Scary? Sometimes it is scary. It's scary to surrender, to just let go, to put your hands in the life of someone else. It's mentioned that once a man was walking and he fell off a cliff and he was going all the way down and it was looking like end of story. And then he somehow grabbed onto a branch and he was hanging there. But the branch wasn't going to last long and he thought, my God, it's a long way down. And then he looked up in the sky and he said, if there's a God out there, help me. And then a voice came from the sky, yes, my son, I am here. Just let go and I will catch you. And he looked up and said, is there anyone else there who can help me? It's amazing. Even when God says, let go, I'll catch you, I'll take care, Rakshishati, I'll protect you, don't worry, do not fear. Still, it's so hard to let go. Therefore, we are always trying to control everything. We're always trying to plan and plot. But the surrendered devotee walks seamlessly with Krishna. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur actually mentions that the word Vraja Vraja, we know, is Vrindavan, is Braja. But he says the word Braja literally means to move. And he says one who is a Brajabasi, or one who is qualified to live in Braj, is one who is always moving with the plan of Krishna. And you may have noticed in your life, Krishna's plan is always changing. Krishna's plan is very unpredictable. Krishna, he likes to play, and sometimes it's hard to just play with him, follow his plan. But the Brajabasi is walking with Krishna. Okay, Krishna, you want me to take me here? Okay, let's go. Or you want me to change it? Okay, let's do that. That kind of ability just to walk with Krishna. So, surrender. This is what will make a devotee very, very attractive to Krishna. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also says that Krishna means the all-attractive one. But he says Krishna also means one who is all-attracted. Krishna is not just attractive, but Krishna is also attracted. And who is he attracted to? The surrendered devotee. In his teachings, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave many, many lectures. But on one occasion, he made a statement. He said, everything I have ever taught in my life can be summed up in this one principle. Interesting. He said, everything I have ever taught to the world can be summed up in one principle. And you know what that is? He called it Drig Drishya Vichar. Have you ever heard of this? It's not so well known actually. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, everything I wanted to teach can be summed up in this. Drig Drishya Vichar. And what does this mean? The philosopher of the seer and the seen. So he said, this is what I want to teach the world. That everyone thinks they are the seer and God is the seen. In other words, I will come in front and I will see God. But he says, all my teachings are to show people, to teach the world that it's actually the other way around. God is the seer and we are seen. In other words, you have no capacity to see God. But if you qualify yourself, then God will want to see you. And if you're seen by God, if you receive the merciful glance of God, if you actually take darshan, which means not that we're actually seeing God, but God is actually seeing us, then your life is perfect. And what does it take for one to be seen by God? Surrender. One who is a surrendered devotee, immediately Krishna is looking for that person. And therefore, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, this is what I wanted to teach the world, surrender. So it takes a lot to surrender. One must have a deep realization within them of their situation in the world. It's mentioned that Rupa Goswami, he was surrendered, of course, from the very beginning till the very end. But one of his biographers gives a story of how he became surrendered. As you know, Rupa Goswami was working for the Muslim government and he was wanting to meet Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but somehow the time wasn't right. And then they say one thing happened which triggered his dedication to Mahaprabhu. He said that one night he was in Ramakeli and the Nawab called him from Gård and said, I'm conquering some lands and I want you to immediately come to Gård. So the first thing is the messenger arrived in the middle of the night. The second thing is that there was a huge, massive storm outside. And so no one in their right mind would have gone out at that time, neither at that hour of the day, nor in that kind of condition of weather. But the Nawab had called him. So Rupa Goswami said, the Nawab has called me, so I should go. So in those times when they wanted to transport someone from one place to another, they would go by palanquin. So Rupa Goswami was being carried in the palanquin in the middle of the night through this treacherous forest with a raging storm. And as they were walking through the forest in these terrible conditions, they walked past a village, and Rupa Goswami overheard a husband and wife speaking. And the husband said to the wife, "Who in the right mind would be going out at this time in the night, in these weather conditions? Who would be traveling at this time?" And the wife said back to the husband, "I don't know, but it could only be a dog, a thief, or a slave." So only three options. And Rupa Goswami overheard this. Who would be walking? Only a dog, a thief, or a slave. And it said that Rupa Goswami in that moment, of course, he was a surrendered devotee, but playing the part, he realized, I am that dog. Because I think I'm in a big position, but actually I'm just completely under the control of my master. Actually, I am a thief because I got this body from Krishna and I've sold it and I'm using it in someone else's service. Therefore, I've stolen what was Krishna's and I'm using it for someone else. And he said, actually, I am a slave because I think I have free will, but I've been controlled by I'm bound by my attachment to the king, to my position, and to all of these things. Therefore, I'm a slave. Therefore, Rupa Goswami, he said, I'm a dog, I'm a thief, I'm a slave, I need to get out. And it said that that was the moment when actually he divided his wealth, and then immediately he ran to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So of course we know Rupa Goswami was, of course, always surrendered. But it's an indication. When one deeply understands this in their heart, these realizations deeply come, then one naturally thinks, what am I doing here? My life is, I just need to surrender to Krishna. That's what I need to do. So, let us read a little bit from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. What does it actually mean to surrender? So today we'll read from the Madhya Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is chapter number 22, entitled The Process of Devotional Service. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, once he spreads the whole Harinam Sankirtan around South India in Jagannath Puri, he said that when he spreads the holy name of Krishna, then it goes like wildfire. Entire villages just get caught up in the holy name of Krishna. It's like a revolution. It said that when the Harinam party would come by a village, it would be like a whirlwind. And as it would come past the village, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Harinam Sankirtan party, like a whirlwind, all the villagers would get sucked into the Harinam party. And it said the Harinam party would move on, and everyone was just disappeared into the Harinam. No one would come back into the village. The whole entire villages were emptied by the Harinam Sankirtan. So Mahaprabhu created a revolution. But then what Mahaprabhu does at the end of the Madhya Leela is he stops at Prayag and Allahabad. And in these two places, Prayag and Varanasi. And in these two places, he instructs Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami on how to practice devotional service so that they can write down the books for generations to come. So these are very, very important chapters because they tell us how to actually achieve this surrender. So today we're reading from one of these instructions of Mahaprabhu of how to become surrendered. So we're reading from chapter number 22, text number 100. Is that there? Yeah. So you can please repeat after me. Anukulyasya sankalpa Pratikulyasya varjana Rakshishyati iti vishvasho Goptritve varanam tatha Atmanikshepakarpanye Sadvida sharanagati Anukulyasya sankalpa Pratikulyasya varjana Rakshishyati iti vishvasho Goptritve varanam tatha Atmanikshepakarpanye Sadvida sharanagati Anukulyasya sankalpa Anukulyasya varjanam Vishwati vishvasho Goptritre varanam tatha Atmanikshepakarpanye Vida saranagati Anukulyasya sankalpa Anukulyasya varjanam Vishyati iti vishvasho Goptritve varanam tatha Atmanikshepakarpanye Sadvida saranagati Anukulyasya sankalpa Pratikulyasya varjanam Rakshishyati iti vishvasho Goptritve varanam tatha Atmanikshepakarpanye Sadvidha saranagati Anukulyasya sankalpa Pratikulyasya varjanam Rakshishyati iti vishvaso Goptritve varanam tatha Atmanikshepakarpanye Sadvida saranagati Anukulyasya of anything that assists devotional service to the Lord. Sankalpa, acceptance. Pratikulyasya, or anything that hinders devotional service. Varjanam, complete rejection. Rakshishyati, he will protect. Iti, thus. Vishvasha, strong conviction. Goptritve, being the guardian, like the father or husband, master or maintainer. Varanam, acceptance. Tatha, as well as. Atmanikshepa, full self-surrender. Karpanye, humility. Sadvida, sixfold. Sharanagati, process of surrender. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The 6 divisions of surrender are the acceptance of those things favorable to devotional service, the rejection of unfavorable things, the conviction that Krishna will give protection, the acceptance of the Lord as one's guardian or master, full self-surrender and humility. Purport. One who is fully surrendered is qualified with the 6 following characteristics. The devotee has to accept everything that is favorable for the rendering of transcendental loving service to the Lord. 2, he must reject everything unfavorable to the Lord's service. That is also called renunciation. 3, a devotee must be firmly convinced that Krishna will give him protection. No one else can actually give one protection, and being firmly convinced of this is called faith. This kind of faith is different from the faith of an impersonalist who wants to merge into the Brahman effulgence in order to benefit by cessation of repeated birth and death. A devotee wants to remain always in the Lord's service. In this way, Krishna is merciful to his devotee and gives him all protection from the dangers found on the path of devotional service. 4, the devotee should accept Krishna as his supreme maintainer and master. He should not think that he is being protected by a demigod. He should depend only on Krishna, considering him the only protector. The devotee must be firmly convinced that within the 3 worlds he has no protector or no maintainer other than Krishna. 5, self-surrender means remembering that one's activities and desires are not independent. The devotee is completely dependent on Krishna, and he acts and thinks as Krishna desires. The devotee, 6, the devotee is meek and humble, as stated in Bhagavad Gita. Sarvasya chaham hridhi sanivishto mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha vedeshcha sarveraham eva vedyo vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of the Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. Bhagavad Gita 15:15. Situated in everyone's heart, Krishna deals differently according to the living entity's position. The living entity's position is to be under the protection of the illusory energy or under Krishna's personal protection. When a living entity is fully surrendered, he is under the direct protection of Krishna, and Krishna gives him all intelligence by which he can advance in spiritual realization. The non-devotee, however, being under the protection of the illusory energy, increasingly forgets his relationship with Krishna. Sometimes it is asked how Krishna causes one to forget. Krishna causes his devotee to forget material activities, and through the agency of Maya, Krishna causes the non-devotee to forget his devotional service to the Lord. This is called Apohana. Srila Prabhupada ki. So throughout the scriptures we find different lists like this which characterize a devotee who is on a certain level. But these lists are very, very useful because it's not just that they characterize someone who's on this level, but what they also do is they tell us what we need to do in order to come to that level. In other words, if we look at this list and we feel we are not there, then it helps us to understand what kind of mood, what kind of mentality we have to cultivate in order to get there. For example, later on in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami will explain who is the devotee on the level of bhav. And then he'll give all the characteristics. Kshanter avyartha kalatvam viraktir manashunyata ashabandha samutkantha namagane sadaruchi ashaktistar gunakhyane pritistad vasati stale ityadayo nubhavashyur jata bhavan kure jane. So Rupa Goswami will say, if someone is on bhav, if someone is just about to reach pure love for Krishna, then you will be able to understand, because they will have certain qualities. First thing, kshantir, ability to forgive. Someone in bhav has an incredible capacity to forgive. And we may say, definitely not there. And then at that point, we look at the list and realize, I have to be more forgiving. And if I'm not forgiving, then it means that part of my heart will be blocked from achieving prema. Kshantir avyartakaladvam. Another symptom of a devotee in bhav, naturally, don't want to waste any time. No time to waste. We say, not there. Then we look at our life and realize, now I need to fill more of the gaps in my life with Krishna conscious activity. In other words, like this, when you go through the list one by one, it's not just the characteristics of someone in bhav, but it's also the activities that one should perform if one wants to become a bhava bhakta. And in the same way, when we read this list, this is telling us effortlessly, someone who's surrendered, they do these things effortlessly. However, if we look at it and think we're not there, at least it gives us the indication of what we need to do in our life to become surrendered. And so 6 different things are given here. Sometimes surrender can be seen externally, and then the deeper surrender is internal surrender. In Krishna consciousness, what we're often doing is focusing on external surrender first. Surrender to activities, surrender to following certain regulations, surrender to rising early, for example. And these are external things. And what happens is when we develop this external surrender, then what will eventually happen is the internal surrender, which this is talking about, will naturally come. So here, can you see the translation there? If you can bring the translation. If you look at the 6 symptoms of surrender, then these are categorized sometimes in different ways. And one way they're categorized is that the first 2 relate to the mind. Surrender of the mind. Because what is the function of the mind? Accepting and rejecting. And therefore the first 2 symptoms of surrender is that one accepts and rejects only on the basis of what is favorable for Krishna's service. And then one can understand, that's how I surrender my mind. The next 2, it said, relate to surrender of the intelligence. Rakshishyati ti vishvasho goptritve varanam tatha. You see, the intelligence is always trying to plan for the future, plan for my security, plan for my safety, plan to make sure that bad thing doesn't happen. And therefore the intelligence is always working for self-preservation. Therefore, you'll know that someone has surrendered their intelligence when they understand Krishna is the protector, Krishna is the maintainer. That doesn't mean I don't use my intelligence, but it means I understand my intelligence is not going to ultimately protect me. Because you can make all the plans and Krishna can circumvent it. Hiranyakashipu learned that the hard way. Because by his intelligence, he thought that he could protect himself. I'm not going to die in the sky or on the ground. I'm going to die outside or inside. I'm not going to die by a man or an animal. I'm not going to die in the night or the day. And then Krishna circumvented it all and killed him anyway. It's amazing. No matter how intelligent you are, it won't protect you. Only Krishna can protect you. And therefore the second 2 are said to relate to intelligence. You surrender your intelligence. So if the first 2 are surrender of the mind, the second 2 are surrender of the intelligence, what do you think the last 2 are? Surrender of the heart, yeah. It said surrender of the ego. One's complete sense of identity. In other words, right now we have a false ego, and a false ego means I use this body according to my plans for enjoyment and so on and so forth. But real ego means Atmanikshepa. It's all a facility to be a servant of Krishna. And what's the essential quality of a servant of Krishna? They're humble. Can't be proud and be a servant of Krishna, because a humble person realizes I'm just an instrument. And so when one has these two, then one can understand, now my ego is surrendered. So we kind of think external surrender is hard enough. It's like following the external process of Krishna consciousness already is like a hard enough surrender. But actually, that's just the beginning. The real surrender is when we have this surrender of the mind, the intelligence, and the ego. And so it's very, very beautiful, because when we look at the lives of the great Vaishnavas, contemporary Vaishnavas that you live with, you will see these characteristics. And then when you see the life and times of the great Vaishnavas, the Acharyas, then you will see that they exude these qualities. And therefore, it acts for us as an inspiration of how to do it. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is an incredible example of someone who embodied all of these 6 principles very, very beautifully. Anukulyasya sankalpa, to accept whatever is required for Krishna's service. It's interesting that sometimes if one is a renunciate, they can also become attached to their renunciation. And so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wasn't even attached to his renunciation. He was ready to drive in a Rolls Royce. When at that time, many sadhus would not dare to go on anything except a bullock cart. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, a sadhu, doesn't wear stitched cloth. No. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, what to speak of stitched cloth, he would get the best tailor-made clothes. Sadhus would not engage with money. In fact, there's even monastic traditions now, if sadhus would touch money, even by accident, then they have to fast for a day. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, no problem. He would engage with all of these things because he saw that they were favorable to the service of Krishna. And therefore, he was ready. He understood Rupa Goswami's principle. Anashaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjata nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagyam uchyate. This is called yukta vairagya. When we understand that everything in the world has a Hari Sambandha, has a connection with Krishna, and when you use everything in the world, understanding its connection with Krishna's service, then you can utilize it and be the greatest renunciate. So therefore, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur accepted so many things that otherwise people were looking at him saying, what kind of sadhu is this? But he was just utilizing whatever he could to spread Krishna consciousness. Now one may say, but isn't it dangerous? Isn't it dangerous to utilize so many things? Because maybe you could get attached, maybe you could get intoxicated by it. But then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also showed the next principle, which is the rejection of unfavorable things. In other words, in his life, he also showed a high level of detachment when it was necessary for that stage of his life. At the age of 31, in 1905, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur decided to take a vow. He decided to take a vow that I will chant 192 rounds every day, not for one day, not for 1 week, not for 1 year. I will chant 192 rounds every day until I reach 1 billion names of Krishna. And at that time, he didn't need technology. At that time, he didn't need nice clothes. At that time, he didn't need any kinds of facilities, and therefore he never accepted anything. All he did was he lived in a mud hut. And he said that even the roof, when it would break, then he wouldn't even bother to repair it because he was just so absorbed in chanting. He said that in that time he would only eat once a day. In fact, during that time when it was Chaturmasya, he didn't just eat once a day, but he would eat in a very special way. He would cook some boiled rice with ghee, and then he would put his hands behind his back, and then he would go down, and however much he could grasp with 3 mouthfuls, that was his prasad for the day. Mahaprasade Govinde. Enjoy. So now we begin to see, yes, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used expensive cars, expensive technology. He did so many things, but just see how he was renounced. When it wasn't necessary for his service, he didn't have any attachment to it whatsoever, because pratikulyasya varjanam, he's also able to reject those things which don't facilitate. So when it didn't facilitate, let it go. Don't need it. So like this, we begin to see the character of someone who's very, very surrendered. They're able to just seamlessly make choices in their life. Sometimes we don't know, like, what choice should I make? What decision should I make? Should I do this? Should I do that? This job or that job? But when one is very, very clear, in this life, I have one goal and one goal only, and that is to serve Krishna in the best way. The more that goal is clear, not just theoretically, but within one's heart, the easier it is to make decisions, because one will know very clearly what will facilitate their service, and therefore certain things accept, other things reject. Then you know someone surrendered. Then here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling the Goswamis the next characteristic of someone who surrendered: Rakshishyati Vishvasho. Krishna will protect me. How do you test Krishna's protection? How do you test whether you have faith in Krishna's protection? You'll know that a devotee has very, very high faith in Krishna's protection when they're willing to do very, very dangerous things for Krishna with no problem at all. Their ability to take risks, their ability to come out of the comfort zone, their ability to make sacrifice expands to an unlimited degree, because they know Krishna has to protect me. If I do it for Krishna, Krishna will definitely protect me. Therefore, they become completely fearless. And therefore, you know that someone has embraced this principle, Rakshishyati, because they will be able to do fearless things in their spiritual life. And that's what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did. He was fearless. It said that he was speaking out against so many deviations in the world. He was speaking out against the caste brahmanas who were trying to establish that only if you're born in a certain family can you be accepted as a brahmana. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was speaking out against them. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was speaking out against sahajiyas who were trying to imitate very, very high levels of devotion without the necessary purification of heart. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said it's all a show. They're pretending like they have some raga, but actually they don't have any attachment. It's just a show. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was speaking against Mayavadis. He was very, very insistent. In fact, when Prabhupada wrote a verse glorifying Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he especially liked this verse. Prabhupada said, impersonal calamity thou hast moved. Absolute is sentient, thou hast proved. Prabhupada wrote that verse in glorification of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and as soon as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur heard it, he said, he has understood my heart. This is my goal, to defeat impersonalism. So like this, he was speaking out against that. He was even speaking out against practitioners who were duplicitous. He was saying, so many are showing that they are practicing spiritual life, but they are maintaining material attachments. He gave the example of a wedding party that got onto a boat and began rowing into the moonlit evening. And all night they were rowing, and when the sun came up in the morning, they were in exactly the same place. How is that possible? You're rowing all day? Because the anchor was down. And therefore, if the anchor is down, then you're rowing and rowing, but you're only going to go around in circles. And so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur told that if we are duplicitous and we practice, but we maintain material attachments, then round and round and round, speaking out. So like this, it was very heavy. He was speaking strongly. He said, I'm not just a flowery sadhu who will just tell you what you want to hear. He said, I am not one of these sadhus, hum chup, tum chup. I'll be quiet, you be quiet, you don't say anything that agitates me, I won't say that anything that agitates you, we'll speak some nice things, and then we'll all be happy. No. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was ready to speak out. Shanta eva syachindanti mano vyasangam uktibi. It said that the words of a sadhu, the words of a saintly person are razor sharp, and they're so sharp, mano vyasangam uktibi, that they can sever the attachments that are within the mind of a conditioned soul. And so the Mahabharata says the words of a politician are like butter, but their heart is like a razor. But the words of a sadhu are like a razor, but his heart is like butter. So although he spoke very, very strong, he was doing it out of compassion. But when he spoke very, very strong, then it brought a lot of opposition. In fact, there were people who were trying to kill Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur because he was exposing so many people. In fact, the police once came to him and said, Swamiji, people are bribing us to assassinate you. And they looked at him and said, it's not that we don't take bribes and assassinate people. We do that all the time. But we're not going to do it with you because you're a saintly person. But we just want to know. We want you to know people are after you. People want to kill you. Just calm down. No, he said, I will speak out. In fact, he said that once he went on a parikrama, and because he was speaking out against certain caste brahmanas, so-called Goswamis, then it's mentioned that once his camp was encircled by dacoits and they were ready to attack. And they wanted Bhaktisiddhanta. They wanted him dead or alive. And it said that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he had one Grihastha disciple, Binod Bihari, and they actually changed cloth. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur took his white cloth and he took his saffron cloth, and in this way they smuggled Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur out of that place because people were trying to kill him. So therefore, but Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur never stopped, because he knew Krishna will protect me. If I do the right thing, if I speak the right thing, if I have the right pure desires, then nobody can harm me. Mare Rakhe Krishna. If Krishna wants to kill me, nobody can protect me. And if somebody wants to protect me, if Krishna wants to protect me, nobody can kill me. Then it's mentioned here, Goptritve Varanam, the maintainer. To understand that we don't have to do anything in this world which is adharmic to maintain ourselves. We don't have to cheat, we don't have to lie, we don't have to flatter others, we don't have to engage in questionable activities, we don't have to sacrifice our principles and character to survive in this world. Krishna will protect. Dharma rakshita rakshita. If you protect your dharma will maintain you. And so we see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur knew that maintenance will be there. If you serve Krishna, if you dedicate your life to Krishna, Krishna, why will he not maintain you? He'll provide everything. And so actually even in his math, he was only looking for individuals who would be able to hear and chant. He was happy if he would just get individuals who could come there and just hear and chant all day. In fact, he said that once he put an advert out in the paper and he said, vacancies available at the math. All you have to do is read and chant all day, meals and a room will be provided. Nobody applied. Because who can do that? And then some were telling him, but if you just fill this place with people who are hearing and chanting, how will it all go on? And he said, don't you have faith that if you engage in chanting Krishna's name and hearing Krishna's glories, and you do it actually with some absorption, not superficially, don't you have faith that Krishna will maintain? Of course he will. And then Atmanikshepa. Atmanikshepa is a very beautiful word. It means literally the giving of one's, all of one's faculties. Atma in Sanskrit can mean different things. It can mean the soul. It can also sometimes mean the body. And it can also sometimes mean the mind. So Atmanikshepa literally means when we align all of those things with the will of Krishna. In other words, when one becomes very, very advanced and desires to surrender, then they can actually understand what Krishna wants them to do. Sometimes devotees say, but I don't know what Krishna wants me to do. How do I hear it? Actually, the main qualification to know what Krishna wants you to do is that you want to know what Krishna wants you to do. In other words, we don't hear with our ears, we hear with our heart. Once a guru was walking through Times Square, and in the middle of that chaotic square, he said to the disciple, do you hear that? The disciple said, you hear so many things here. He said, can't you hear that cat crying? It's like, what cat crying? And they went behind one park bench, and there was a tiny cat there, and it was just slightly crying for help. And the disciple looked at the guru and said, how did you hear that in the midst of so many sounds? And the guru said, I'll show you. And then from his pocket, he brought some coins and he dropped the coins and ding. And immediately 50 people stopped. Like, is that my money? Is that my money? And then he looked at the disciple and he said, just see, you don't hear with your ears, you hear with your heart. In other words, when people's hearts are filled with greed, then you'll hear money. Doesn't matter how faint it is, you'll hear it. And when your heart is filled with compassion, you will hear the sound of someone who needs help. Because you don't hear with the ears, you hear with the heart. And so a surrendered devotee, Atmanikshepa, it's easy for them to align everything with Krishna because they know what Krishna wants. And they know what Krishna wants because they want to know what Krishna wants. But oftentimes we don't want to know what Krishna wants because we're like, I don't think I'm going to like what Krishna wants. So I can't actually hear it. I can't hear you, Krishna. I can't hear you. I'm telling you. And then finally a surrendered devotee, Karpanye, very, very humble. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was so bold, he was such a leader, he was so prominent, but he was so humble. Like I was mentioning yesterday, he said, I didn't make any disciples. I just saw that those who were coming were representatives of my spiritual master. I saw them as my spiritual master. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he was leaving this world, it said that one of the final lectures he gave was a lecture on Trinadapi Sanicena, to be more humble than a blade of grass. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, your advancement in spiritual life will be proportionate to how closely you follow this verse, to be more humble than a blade of grass and to be more tolerant than a tree. According to how closely you follow that verse, how much you imbibe that verse, you'll make a proportionate amount of spiritual advancement. And therefore, through his words, through his activities, through his example, he also, along with being bold, along with being uncompromising, along with being strong, along with being harder than a thunderbolt, he was also softer than a rose, very, very humble, very, very meek. So like this, we hear of the lives of great devotees. To surrender to Krishna is the Swarup Lakshan. It's the essential quality that all of us are trying to develop. And therefore, remember, when these characteristics are given, they're not just showing a perfectional stage, but they're giving us the clue. The more we cultivate these 6 things, the more natural surrender arises within the heart. And it's that surrender which will bring a joyful life. Because when we're walking in line with Krishna's plan, then life is beautiful. And so today we're meditating on surrender and the life of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai. Alright, I think we have about 5 minutes or so. If anyone has any questions or any comments or anything I talked about that you would maybe like to know anything more about.
Yes, you were speaking about Rupa Goswami when he came to the point when he wanted to surrender. Then he surrendered, then he joined Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And I'm thinking, when we were young, we just went to the temple and we never left. But nowadays, most devotees, they keep their lives separate. And also, most of us also, when we're growing older, we have established some kind of independent maintenance and so on. So how do you catch that spirit of surrender when it's not so easy to do it in a physical or practical way, to keep that spirit of surrender in your regular life when you pay your bills and you make your own decisions and so on?
Thank you. Of course, I told this story. Of course, Rupa Goswami was surrendered even before this incident. In fact, even before this incident, he wanted to leave everything. He wanted to run away and he wanted to join Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sent him a letter with a cryptic verse. Paravyasinini nari vyagrapi griha karmashu tadeva svadayatyantar navasangadasāyanam. Mahaprabhu sent him a letter, and in this letter he sent a cryptic verse. Paravyasinini nari, when a woman is married but she has another lover, then what does she do? Griha karmashu, she stays at home and she does all of her activities even more attentively, so that no one will suspect that there's someone else in her life. But all the time, navasangadasāyanam, they're only thinking, when will I be with my lover? So this is the verse that Mahaprabhu sent to Rupa Goswami. And therefore Rupa Goswami understood, no, my surrender at this point is I must stay here, I must do my duties, but I must constantly remember Krishna. So the first thing is that surrender is not an external surrender. But sometimes it may feel that when you externally surrender, it's kind of like easier. When you have your life out there with so many other things, it's harder. I don't know if that's true. I think even when you're living in the ashram, even when you've renounced everything, it's the complexity of still holding back is still there actually, because it's still a very internal material desire. And so I think the way we have to do it is we have to look at these things and just make sure we're cultivating these qualities. Look at the things you have in your grihastha ashram and ask yourself, how much of it is connected to Krishna? How much of it am I using for Krishna? How much spiritual activity is in my life? How much have I filled my life with service? And therefore, this is the substance of actually becoming surrendered, not walking away from everything. So I think it's not so much about the external situation. Even Ramananda Rai, when he was discussing with Mahaprabhu, and Mahaprabhu asked him, what's the goal of life? Then he gave many, many verses, and Mahaprabhu kept saying, Eho bhaiya, agi kaho aar, that's external, say something deeper. And then finally, Rai Ramananda said a verse, and Mahaprabhu was happy with that verse. And what was that verse? Jnane prayasamadapasya namanta eva jivanti sanmukharitam bhavadiya vartam stane stita shrutigatam tanuvan manobir ye prayaso jitatito prasite strilokyam. When Rai Ramananda recited this verse, Mahaprabhu said, this is the right answer. And the essence of this verse is stane stita. Wherever you are, just stay there. In other words, this verse says, don't change anything. Instead, what should you do? With your words, with your mind, with your energy, just fill your life in hearing about Krishna and serving Krishna. So simple as that. The more you do that, the external situation doesn't matter so much. So sometimes what can also happen is when one externally leaves everything behind, that can actually become a block to their surrender because they become complacent. Because they think, I have surrendered, I left everything behind. But if you're still carrying your material desires, you haven't actually left anything behind. And so sometimes even renunciation can become a block to actual surrender if it makes one proud or complacent. So the real thing is we just need to fill our life with devotional service. Great.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I had a question
Oh,
here.
yes.
It seems that humbleness is a very important aspect in our spiritual practice, because in a humble state of mind, one can chant the holy name constantly, and that's our process. And to me, humbleness seems to be slightly vague, in the sense like, what is it? I have heard one example from my spiritual master is that one can be humble when one continues to serve no matter what happens to them, like whatever circumstances they're in. But perhaps you have other examples to show what humbleness would look like. What is like someone trying to become very...
Yeah, many definitions of humility are given. For example, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says humility means to not be anxious to be honored by others. So like this, sometimes it said humility doesn't mean to think less of yourself, but to think of yourself less. So different definitions are given. The one that I meditate on that really helps me to measure my own humility is, for me, humility means three things, that one deeply understands three things. Number one, I'm not the doer. Number two, I don't deserve. And number 3, I am a das. If someone lives with these 3 mentalities very, very deeply, the first one, I'm not the doer. Anything that I'm doing in my life, it's all by Krishna's mercy. It's all by the mercy of the Vaishnavas. Me alone, I don't have any power to achieve anything. Naturally, when one realizes I'm not the doer, this means great humility. Then I don't deserve. When one has a deep gratitude for what they've received in their life, then they have no expectation. They have no expectation to be honored. They have no expectation to be glorified. They have no expectation to be recognized, because they know I've received more than I deserve. Therefore, when gratitude, I was mentioning yesterday, when gratitude is very deep, then expectation is very, very low. And when one's expectation is very, very low, then it means they're humble. Therefore, the second mentality is I don't deserve. I already got way more than I deserve. And the third one is that I am a das. How do you know you're humble? Because in every single situation, you're asking yourself the question, what can I do in this situation to serve? If you're a leader, then you're thinking, how can I serve the people under me? If someone's in pain, then you're thinking, how can I serve them to relieve their pain? If someone wants to talk, then you're thinking, how can I give the best of my attention so that they can share their heart? In every situation, a humble person is always thinking, how can I serve in this situation? Not how can I enjoy? And so, you may not be able to tell a humble person externally, because sometimes they act. I mean, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is like, someone could perceive him in a different way, but he's humble because deep inside he knows, I'm not the doer, I don't deserve, and I am the das. And therefore every act is driven by a humble spirit. So these are very deep. If you meditate on them and ask yourself, how much do I live in this frame of mind? Then we can understand the actual level of our humility.
Thank you, Maharaj. Can we request Krishna to force us to surrender if we're conditioned?
You can't request Krishna to force you to surrender, but great devotees do pray to Krishna to create acute situations, though, so that they will be forced to surrender. But I don't know if you want to do that. Up to you. Yes, that's why Queen Kunti says, Vipada Shantu Tahashashvat Tatra Tatra Jagat Guru Bhavato Darshanam Yachyad Apunar Bhavadarshanam. May more and more calamities come in my life. Because otherwise, Krishna, I'll just become comfortable, I'll just become complacent, I'll just become mediocre. Therefore, Krishna, create a situation, create some intensity so that I realize that you are the only refuge. But no, Krishna can't force you to surrender, because the only one thing Krishna gives you that he never interferes with is free will. Therefore, Krishna says to Arjuna at the end, Yata Ichcha Tatha Guru. Now it's your desire. Do what you want to do. It's up to you. Krishna is not going to kick the door in and demand anything. He'll just wait behind the door patiently. And if you knock on the door, Krishna will open it. But yeah, it's intense. Sometimes you think, what's it going to take to surrender? I don't know. Without something acute happening, are we really going to be able to do it willingly? I don't know. That every devotee has to. Okay, I think time has gone.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maharaj. Can you please remain seated? We have some announcements to make. Shami and Gita.
Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.